The banker didn't even look up when the check slid across the polished marble desk. He glanced at the number once. $15 million. Then he laughed. Not a polite laugh. Not an awkward one. A sharp, dismissive laugh, the kind that cuts deeper than words. "You people really think this is funny," he muttered, already reaching for the shredder. The woman standing across from him didn't flinch. No raised voice. No protest. Just silence, and a calm that didn't belong in a room like this. The machine whirred to life. Thin strips of paper began falling into the bin, each slice erasing what the banker thought was a bad joke. What he didn't know, what no one in that bank knew, was that this check wasn't a gamble. It was already cleared. It was already verified. And in less than 5 minutes, one phone call would turn this quiet transaction into a corporate nightmare. Because the woman he just humiliated wasn't there to beg. She was there to confirm something. And the moment she lifted her phone, everything changed. The bank sat at the corner of the city's financial district, glass walls, steel frames, and quiet power humming through every floor. This wasn't a place for mistakes. Or misunderstandings. Or people who didn't belong. Inside, the air smelled faintly of polished wood and money. Conversations stayed low. Shoes clicked softly against marble floors. Security guards stood still, watching without watching. And that morning, she walked in alone. Her name was Amora Lewis. Mid-30s. Calm posture. Simple navy coat. No jewelry except a thin silver chain around her neck. She didn't rush. Didn't hesitate. Didn't look around like someone out of place. She approached the counter like she had done this before. The banker assigned to her, Richard Hale, had been with the institution for over 20 years. Gray at the temples. Perfectly pressed suit. A man who believed he could tell who mattered within 3 seconds of eye contact. And in his mind, Amora didn't. He gave her the professional smile, the kind that never reached his eyes. "How can I help you today?" he asked, already distracted. Amora placed a single envelope on the counter. "I'd like to deposit this," she said. Richard opened it casually. Then his fingers froze. $15 million. His eyes narrowed. He checked the name. Checked it again. Then looked up at her for the first time. "Where did you get this?" he asked. The tone shifted, not curious, not impressed, suspicious. Amora met his gaze. "It's a payment." "For what?" he pressed. She paused. Just a beat too long. "For a contract," she said evenly. Richard leaned back in his chair. This wasn't his first rodeo. He'd seen forged checks, scams, fake windfalls. And in his experience, they always came with a story. And he had already decided this one. He typed quickly, pretending to verify something. In reality, he wasn't checking the system. He was watching her reflection in the glass, her stillness, her lack of panic. It annoyed him. "You're aware," he said, "that attempting to deposit a fraudulent instrument is a serious offense." Amora nodded once. "I'm aware." That calm again. Richard stood up. "I'll take care of this," he said, reaching for the check. Instead of stamping it, he turned and fed it straight into the shredder. The sound filled the space between them. A few nearby customers looked up. A teller froze mid-motion. One of the guards shifted his weight. Amora didn't move. Richard turned back, dusting his hands as if he'd just thrown away trash. "Let this be a lesson," he said. "This bank doesn't entertain nonsense." For the first time, Amora spoke more than 3 words. "That was a certified executive transfer," she said. Richard smirked. "Sure it was." He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "If you'd like to leave before security escorts you out, I'd recommend it." That's when Amora reached into her coat. Not for another document. Not for identification. For her phone. Richard scoffed. "Calling your lawyer won't." She raised one finger. "Please," she said softly. "Just a moment." The room felt different suddenly. Quieter. She placed the phone to her ear and turned slightly away from the counter. "Yes," she said. "It's me." A pause. "They shredded it." Another pause, longer this time. Her jaw tightened, not in fear, but resolve. "I'll hold," she said. Richard rolled his eyes and waved a guard over. But then, his screen lit up. An internal alert. Then another. Then his manager stood up abruptly from her office. Because somewhere far above that marble floor, someone very powerful had just been interrupted. And they were not pleased. And that was only the beginning. The office lights above flickered briefly as the news traveled upward through the bank's hierarchy. A single shredded check had set off a chain reaction that no one could stop. Richard Hale's phone buzzed relentlessly. Messages, alerts, internal calls. Every tone screamed urgency, but he ignored them, too proud to admit the situation was slipping from his control. Meanwhile, Amara remained calm, her hand steady on her phone. The camera of one nearby customer recorded every detail, the shredded pieces, the smirk, the subtle tension building in the room. Within minutes, whispers spread through the marble lobby like wildfire. "She's serious," someone murmured. "That's 15 million, said another. "Did you see what just happened?" Richard's manager, Evelyn Cross, a woman known for her ruthless efficiency and precise judgment, appeared at the top of the stairwell. Every step she took was deliberate, each heel strike echoing in the suddenly hushed room. Her eyes scanned the scene. Her gaze landed on Amara. A waitress. 15 million. Shredded. And yet standing there as if nothing had happened. "Mr. Hale," Evelyn said, voice sharp enough to cut through the tension. "What is going on?" Richard tried to speak, but words failed him. He gestured vaguely toward the shredder. "Titi." Evelyn's lips pressed into a thin line. She didn't need to be told what had happened. The shredded check. The stunned employees. The recording phone in the crowd. She already understood, and understood the implications. "Where is her identification?" she demanded. Amara, still serene, slowly produced her passport and driver's license. Every detail was perfectly legitimate. Every signature verified. Every stamp authentic. She handed them over without a word, eyes never leaving Evelyn's. Evelyn took them, scanning quickly. She froze just slightly at the sight of the name. A pause that could have lasted an eternity. Richard's face drained of color. The lobby seemed to close in around him. Even the security guard, muscles coiled like springs, realized this was no ordinary situation. Amara's phone call continued in the background, brief, firm, measured. A voice on the other end instructed, confirmed, and redirected. With every word, the tension escalated, invisible but palpable, filling every corner of the room. The tellers whispered among themselves, some peering nervously over the counter, others instinctively stepping back to avoid drawing attention. Customers froze mid-gesture, unsure whether to intervene, record, or flee. The entire scene had transformed from mundane banking into a crucible of suspense and confrontation. Richard realized too late that Amara's calm was not weakness. It was strategy. Every pause, every soft-spoken phrase, every micro-expression had been calculated. And it had worked. The shredded check wasn't a loss. It was a signal. A warning. A setup for the storm that was about to break. The security guard approached, radio at the ready, but even he hesitated. He could feel it. Something about this woman made the air heavy, and his training told him to be cautious. Amara hung up her phone. She looked around the lobby, scanning faces. Every whisper, every gasp, every raised camera lens registered, but she said nothing. Then she spoke, slowly, deliberately. "I want to speak with the person in charge. Right now. Not the manager, not the teller, the person responsible for this bank." Evelyn's eyes widened slightly. The audacity. The precision. The audacity again. Richard tried to interject. "It's not necessary." Amara turned toward him, her voice calm but carrying undeniable authority. "I think it is necessary," she said. And in that moment, the lobby's energy shifted. The power dynamics had already started to reverse. What had begun as a simple transaction had now become a confrontation between assumptions and authority, prejudice and accountability, arrogance and control. Every step Amara took toward the executive office was watched. Every eye followed her. Every whisper amplified her presence. And the shredded pieces of the $15 million check lay scattered, evidence of what had almost been ignored, almost dismissed, almost destroyed. The conference room was still. Even the hum of the air conditioning seemed to pause, as if waiting for the truth to unfold. Amora placed her phone on the table, her fingers lingering over it for a beat, like a conductor poised before the crescendo of a symphony. Richard Hale cleared his throat, finally finding a voice that felt inadequate, fragile against the weight of the moment. Amora, you need to explain. How could this be? 15 million, you're not. She raised a hand, stopping him mid-sentence. I am exactly who I say I am. And I have been for a long time. What you witnessed in the lobby isn't a mistake. It is a reflection of how assumptions cloud judgment, of how bias goes unchecked, of how power is too often blind to truth. The room exchanged uneasy glances. Board members shifted in their chairs. Evelyn's sharp jawline tightened, the first cracks appearing in her polished facade. Amora stood and moved slowly to the shredded fragments of the check. She picked them up, examining them as if they were pieces of a puzzle that had finally revealed the picture. Then she spoke again. I am the majority shareholder of this bank. I hold a controlling interest. I am responsible for its oversight. And yet, today, in my own bank, a manager shredded a check made out to me, without verification, because she judged me by my clothes, my job, my appearance. A murmur rippled across the room. Richard's face paled as comprehension settled in. Evelyn's lips pressed together. The room had collectively realized the magnitude. This wasn't just a personal slight. This was institutional failure. Amora turned to Richard. Do you understand what this means? That your protocols, your staff training, and your assumptions have consequences beyond paper and numbers? That real people, your clients, are affected every day by these biases. Richard swallowed hard, silent. He had never been this confronted, this publicly. The weight of every misstep, every unchecked bias, every dismissal of potential error pressed down on him like an invisible hand. Then Amora did something unexpected. She picked up her phone again and dialed a number she hadn't used since the day she became the majority shareholder. A calm, confident voice answered. It's done, she said softly. On the other end, a team of investigators had already begun reviewing the bank's transaction records, looking for patterns of bias, inefficiency, and abuse. What Amora had suspected for years, the systemic discrimination, the careless judgments, was now about to be exposed with undeniable evidence. Board members whispered among themselves, realizing that this story, this single shredded check, would become a national headline. And the video, the one captured by dozens of phones, was already going viral, spreading across social media at a rate that defied logic. Amora folded her hands and addressed everyone in the room, her voice calm but unwavering. This isn't about revenge. It's about accountability. It's about ensuring that no one is ever humiliated like this again, inside this bank or anywhere else. The room remained silent, but the tension had shifted. Fear mingled with respect. Arrogance had been replaced by the realization that control was no longer theirs to wield unquestioned. And everyone understood, the real revelation wasn't just Amora's identity. It was the power of truth, and the consequence of seeing people as they really are. The following day, the video had exploded online. News anchors replayed the moment the shredded check hit the counter. Social media channels were flooded with screenshots, commentary, outrage, and awe. The world had witnessed a confrontation that was equal parts humiliation, justice, and revelation. Amora, once invisible, now occupied every headline. The phrase "the banker shredded her $15 million check, then she made one call" was trending. But she wasn't basking in the attention. She was preparing for the real work, accountability. Richard Hale's office was a whirlwind of calls and crisis management. Shareholders demanded explanations. Staff members whispered about policy reforms. The bank's reputation teetered on the edge. And in the middle of it all, Amora remained steady, her presence a constant reminder that no wealth could insulate anyone from the consequences of their actions. The hearings began. Boardrooms, committees, investigative panels, everywhere, the same story unfolded. Amora presented evidence, video footage, transaction data, and first-hand accounts of bias. Each revelation hit like a hammer. Every statistic, every testimonial confirmed what the world already suspected. This wasn't an isolated incident. It was a system, and the system had failed. Employees who had once dismissed her now looked on in awe. They saw her not as a threat, not as a mere client, but as a force. Someone who refused to be minimized. Someone who demanded respect. Someone who understood that justice wasn't given, it was claimed. Then came the personal confrontations. Evelyn Cross, the manager, sat across from Amora in a glass conference room. Her face pale, mascara streaked, hands trembling. Amora's gaze was steady. "You acted on assumptions," Amora said quietly, every word deliberate. "You assumed I was less than because of my uniform, because of my job, because of my skin. Do you understand the impact of that choice?" Evelyn's voice cracked. I didn't think." "No," Amora interrupted. "You didn't think. And that is precisely the problem." Amora's words cut through years of conditioned arrogance, exposing not just a single act of prejudice but the silent complicity of countless decisions that had gone unchecked. Evelyn's shoulders slumped. For the first time, she truly understood the human cost of her choices. Meanwhile, Frank Webb, the young teller who had frozen behind the counter, testified in front of investigators. His voice trembled, but he spoke the truth. "I saw what happened. I knew it was wrong, but I was afraid. Afraid of my boss, afraid of making a mistake, afraid of being wrong. But watching Amora, I realized that courage isn't about never being afraid. It's about standing up despite the fear." By the end of the hearings, reforms were enacted. Mandatory bias training. Transparent verification procedures. Community oversight. And in every report, every article, every news segment, the message was clear: respect and dignity were not privileges, they were rights. Finally, months later, Amora returned to the small restaurant where she had worked quietly. She walked in wearing the same uniform, same worn flats. The world outside had shifted, but inside this modest kitchen, nothing had changed. A young teller approached her with a smile. "Here's your deposit," she said. Amora nodded. No questions asked. No assumptions made. Just respect. Just normalcy. And in that moment, Amora understood something profoundly simple. The fight for dignity, for fairness, for humanity, was never about wealth, power, or recognition. It was about choice. About showing up, standing firm, and insisting that the world see the truth, even when it's inconvenient, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it challenges every assumption. She walked out into the afternoon sun, the sounds of the city washing over her, ordinary life moving on around her. And for the first time in a long time, she felt at peace. Not because the world had changed entirely, but because she had shown it that change was possible. The sunlight streamed through the restaurant windows, catching the gleam of stainless steel pans and the warm glow of morning light on polished wooden tables. Amora moved with the calm, practiced rhythm of someone who had faced storms far greater than a viral video or a shredded check. Each step echoed softly against the tile floor, a quiet punctuation to a story that had gripped the nation. Outside, the city thrummed with life, oblivious to the seismic shifts that had occurred behind the doors of Madison Avenue. But inside, Amora's presence carried weight. Not because of her wealth, not because of her position, not because of the headlines splashed across news sites worldwide, but because of what she had chosen to stand for. Human dignity. Accountability. Truth. Her phone buzzed intermittently, alerts of new articles, social media shares, and messages of support from around the globe. The numbers were staggering. Millions had seen the confrontation, millions more had read the detailed reports of institutional bias, and millions had begun to reflect on their own assumptions, their own judgments. But Amora didn't look at the phone. She looked at the young teller behind the counter, a girl with bright eyes and a gentle smile. "Here's your deposit," the girl said, sliding a modest check across the counter. Amora nodded, her expression soft but deliberate. No questions were asked. No assumptions were made. No judgment. Just respect. It was a small moment, almost ordinary, yet it carried more weight than any boardroom confrontation, any media coverage, any viral clip. It was the proof that the lessons learned in marble halls and heated hearings could manifest in everyday interactions. That change, real change, didn't come from money or power alone. It came from consistency, presence, and the courage to insist on fairness in every encounter. Amora stepped back, letting the teller return to her work. She adjusted her apron, smoothing the fabric over her uniform. For a moment, she paused at the doorway, looking out at the streets of Brooklyn bustling with the ordinary rhythm of life. Mothers with strollers, teenagers laughing on corners, delivery bikes weaving through traffic. None of them knew her story. None of them saw the woman in their midst who had just turned a personal humiliation into a nationwide call for accountability. And that was exactly how it should be. Change didn't require recognition. It required action. It required courage. And it required presence, showing up even when the world expects you to be invisible, even when assumptions threaten to define your worth. Behind her, the restaurant carried on, filled with the quiet sounds of daily life. Orders called out, pans clanging, conversation humming. Amora took a deep breath, feeling the weight lift slightly from her shoulders. She had done what needed to be done. She had confronted the system, revealed its flaws, and ensured that others would not have to endure the same indignity without recourse. Her phone buzzed again. Another headline. Another social media clip. Another message of thanks from someone who had been inspired by her courage. She smiled faintly, knowing that the impact of one act, one decision, one refusal to leave the counter, could ripple far beyond a single bank lobby or a single check. Amora turned and walked toward the back door of the restaurant, her worn flats clicking softly against the tile. She paused one last time, glancing at the room, the staff, the patrons. "You never know who you're looking at," she whispered under her breath, a mantra, a warning, a lesson wrapped in 3 simple words. As the door closed behind her, the city continued on, unaware that a quiet revolution had taken place in its midst. A viral moment had become a movement. Bias had been exposed. Respect had been demanded. And dignity had been restored, not through confrontation alone, but through presence, courage, and unwavering insistence on what is right. If this story moved you, made you think, or reminded you that courage exists in the most unexpected forms, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. Because stories like Amora's aren't just entertainment, they are lessons, inspiration, and a reminder that change starts when we refuse to remain invisible. Stay with us for more stories that challenge assumptions, ignite empathy, and remind us all, you never know who you're looking at, and sometimes, the quietest person in the room carries the loudest truth.